just keeping up with your community events, knowing what's going on around you. Expression. So a lot of people use social media to express what they're passionate about, maybe bring up community problems that they see, and then also assemble and actually create projects and movements with lifestyles. And then lastly, shaping the world. A lot of people are using these missions to push for changes, whether or not that's in government, culture, anything that might be seen fit. So as you can see with the shift of technology, we really do need to have a presence there, because that's where people are going for news nowadays. They're not necessarily catching the 5 o'clock or the 10 o'clock news anymore. They're not going on the internet and searching for the county website to see if we posted an update to a disaster. They're going to social media, they're searching for our agency, and if our agency's not there, they're going to start asking their friends if anybody knows anything about it. And we saw that a lot during COVID and other things. Keep in mind too that a lot of people are also cutting the cord. So because we're so busy nowadays, because we're very invested in doing these things on social media, we're not spending money on cable services and news services anymore. We want to consume news at our own pace, 24/7 cycle, rather than catching it during that period of time. And also, a lot of people are looking for outside sources of news and media nowadays to get information, as opposed to just the primary sources that we always had, whether or not that was CNN, Fox News, NBC, all of the big media corporations. A lot of people are looking at freelancers, bloggers, and different professionals to give kind of a different input on where information is coming nowadays. So that kind of wraps up the expectation from our residents of why they're using social media and what they expect from us. But also the media. So because we just talked about how a lot of people have cord cutted, they're not tuning into the TV media anymore. Local media has really had to adjust how they consume information, put together stories, and also disseminate information out to the public. And so the media expects public agencies and governments to have a social media presence nowadays. Because they've really embraced that, they actually use social media to find story ideas, provide situational updates, and also will actually go and look for updates on your disaster, your incident, the issue in your community by going to your page to see if you have an official statement. It kind of fits the way that the media is working nowadays. And a lot of them, if you form a relationship with them and actually ask them, they prefer that. It's easier on them to go to your agency page and get your official statement and just include that in their article, rather than giving you a call, leaving you a voicemail, trying to set up some kind of press situation like that. So it actually really helps you with your media interface, and it also helps you make sure that your official information is getting out through the media platforms, just like we really need it to during public information operations. So everybody, if we could just kind of pause and just think about how 2020 went down, or think about a local incident in your community. So when people are looking for information and they're trying to figure out what's going on, whether or not it was the pandemic, or maybe it's a big fire in your city, or maybe it was a tornado in your jurisdiction, the first thing they do when they see the damage, or they see the flashing lights and hear the sirens, or they see a large gathering of police cars, is they're going to say, what's going on, right? They want to know if they're in danger. They want to know what's occurring at that location. And to be honest, a lot of us are just kind of nosy, right? So immediately, as soon as somebody sees an incident going on, they're going to actually go to social media, like I said, and look for your agency page. Maybe it's the police department page because they see police cars. Maybe it's the fire department page because they see fire trucks. Or, if it's a disaster and hopefully people know about the Office of Emergency Management, they might be looking for your page to see any updates about that. And so when they go to your page and they're searching for an incident notification or any kind of information on it, and they don't see anything, people are like, well, I don't know what's going on. We don't have an official statement from the people that are there. So now I'm going to just go ahead and take time to just make a post on my own platform saying, well, what's occurring at this block, or what's happening at this damaged intersection? Does anybody know why there's a bunch of cop cars down the road? And we see that a ton on Nextdoor and other platforms. And then, of course, if your agency doesn't have a statement out and you're not monitoring social media for those questions, who's actually going to answer those questions? It's going to be your friends, neighbors, outside sources. And often when they answer those questions to their friends, it's going to be interpretations, rumors, he said, she said, and perceptions of what they think might happen. And so you can see, even though people do try to reach out to agencies and they try to check the media and the official sources of information first, if we're not present in the area where they're trying to find the information, they're going to end up asking everybody else and then getting all of the misconceptions, the rumors, and all of the not helpful information that's really going to hurt our community response for the disaster. So it's really important that we're there. And then this is one of my absolutely favorite lines, especially when we're talking about public information, but especially on social media nowadays. If you don't utilize social media and you're not very active on it and constantly putting out updates on the storm or any incident that you're working, somebody else will start speaking for you. If you don't tell your story and release the information at the right time, at the right place, to the right people, the rumors will get to you, and other people will either start saying you're doing things you're not doing, or other platforms will take over that space for you. And as you guys know, with public information, it's really important that we tell our story so we get the right information out and really try to get people to take the actions and do what they need to do during the incident. So I'm going to pause so I can get a drink of water real quick. And so we're going to actually transition here to jump into telling your story. So social media is a great place to release information on all of those incidents that we respond to. But keep in mind that you need to be present even during the blue sky days, right? We can't just only release disaster information and expect to engage with our communities, get followers, get interactions, and build digital relationships with the people that we serve. And so there are actually 3 different ways that we can actually tell our story through social media and make sure that we're shining the light on our organization and getting it out to the community. The first way is actually going to be doing agency updates. So this might be just explaining what the background of your agency is, how your agency works, what are some daily tasks that your agency does, taking pictures around the office, doing interesting projects, like maybe working on a mitigation map or doing something and trying to teach people something in a unique way, highlighting your agency mission or your agency why. Why is your Office of Emergency Management important to the people that you're serving? What's the history of your agency? Oh, sorry guys. All right, I apologize for that. My phone is actually connected to my laptop. But anyways, jumping back into the history, where does your history come from with your agency? How long have you been an agency? Some fire departments and police departments do a really great job with this because they can actually look back decades to see, when their agency originated, really historic incidents or calls, really cool old pictures of fire trucks and things like that. And so those are great things that people are really interested in and will actually get you a lot of engagement. You also want to share accomplishments and service and the visibility of your organization. If you were awarded something by council or you had some kind of award, maybe from IEM or from FEMA or for something that you did regionally, definitely show your community. We work very hard to do our jobs here to protect others and to build resiliency in our communities. So it's important that we're trying to highlight that and show all of the work that we're doing. So after agency updates, we're going to actually move into doing public education. So during COVID, we really had to resort to a lot of digital methods, kind of like this, to continue to form those relationships, not only with colleagues, but also with the people that we serve. In Fairfax County, we no longer could go out and do our really fun outreach events that we love doing, the community fairs, going into the schools. So we really needed to rely on doing digital presentations, but also having a very strong public education social media game. And so we could share preparedness tips, public information sources, such as who to call when you have a power outage, or how to report storm damage, all of that information. Teaching people local hazards, also doing awareness campaigns and EM basics. Those are all great things to also help tell your story, but also hopefully get your community more prepared while you're doing social media. And then lastly, we're going to touch a little bit on doing incident information as a way to tell your story and to actually show your community that when you have an incident, you are taking action. Because when you're quiet on social media, or you're not releasing to the media that you're responding to something, that you're taking care of something, it's very easy for people to assume that you're doing nothing. And that's not the perception that we want to give. We want to show that we're actually responsive. And so incident information includes the notice of the incident in the community, that it occurred or is ongoing, the timing, actions to take. That is extremely important, because we know with residents that if we don't give actions on what they need to do during the tornado warning or during the disaster, they actually won't be able to act and stay safe as effectively as if we do. Some of that has to do with adrenaline and also stress, and just other human interaction research issues. So it's really great to make sure that when you're saying, hey, you know, there's a tornado warning, seek shelter inside, away from windows, cover your head, providing steps in a easy language for people to understand. Also providing information on aid processes, especially with misconceptions on FEMA checks or reimbursement, or how people are going to be able to recover post-incident. It's really important that we do social media to kind of guide them in the right direction, or refer them to the right processes to get their recovery on track. And then lastly, recovery information, so where they can go to get all of those resources. All right, so I just talked a ton on shining your light. To do so effectively, especially for engagement and to catch people's eye on social media, you definitely want to use photos, videos, and graphics. So photos are great opportunities during an incident or during exercises or even around the office to show behind the scenes, showing people what we do, how we're responding, all of those things, showing action shots, and also making our agency human. It's very hard, especially in government, to kind of show that we're humans behind the screen, right? That we're doing all of this work. We're passionate about keeping people safe and all of those things. And so providing photos actually allows for that relationship to build a little better with who we're trying to get the information out with. Videos, you could do video interviews about some projects that are going on in your office. Also, you could do press briefings, or if you happen to have a press briefing, you can video that and caption that and have that on your social media platform. You can also do videos on fun trends, as long as it's appropriate and approved for your agency and also fits the brand of what your agency is trying to do. A big part of having social media is trying to just decide what your tone is going to be, your brand, how you want your agency to be portrayed in your community. And if you go onto social media platforms, you can find that there are a lot of different styles that people choose. Many are fairly formal, but there is a trend with some government social media accounts to actually be a little more fun, a little more forward thinking, and a little more, I guess you could say, connective to residents. And then with graphics, make sure that when we're doing graphics, whether or not it's for a disaster or for outreach, that they're interactive some way. They're very visual, easy to read. The colors aren't too bright or anything. Easy to understand, not too cluttered, and also have very helpful information. It's really important to note that while it's important to include a link on your social media posts, maybe a link to your website, a link to your press release, all of those things, less than 40% of people on social media will actually click the link for more information. Most people are just scrolling and they read the post, they look at the picture, and then they say, okay, well, that's it. And they keep scrolling. So when you're making that post and you're making those graphics, try to pick the top 3 most important things that you want them to know and include that in the post. Still include the link, but kind of have the assumption that most people are actually not going to be clicking on that link to read additional information at your website. All right, so we talked about having social media, posting to it, shining our light, but just throwing a post up on your social media accounts actually isn't enough. You have to really have a purpose to what you're posting. You have to have a design to what you're posting, and you have to understand the platforms to really maximize your reach. With social media, our goal is to try to get our content and our information out to as many residents as possible. And so we really have to understand each platform and then also understand our audience to try to get people to engage with us to boost our visibility across our community. And so to do that effectively, the first thing that we want to do is to actually do a population analysis. Okay. And as emergency managers, I think we're all very familiar with the idea that we need to understand and know our community. We need to know who we serve through census data, whether or not that's what age our demographics are, race, education, language, occupation. So what are the industries in your community? What time do they work? Do you have a bedroom community where most people actually commute out of your community during the day and come back at night? All of those things we typically know anyway for emergency planning, but it's very helpful to know for this because that's actually going to drive what kind of content you make, what your tone is, when you're going to post the most important information, and who you're posting to, as well as what languages you're going to use, and also the word choices that you're going to use to connect your information with them. So once you do that population analysis and you kind of have a good feel for what the majority of your community is, you can actually decide to choose social media platforms. And keep in mind that not everybody has every social media platform. It's actually best to pick probably about 2 or 3 that really fit your community and be very efficient with those rather than have every single social media platform that you can possibly have and try to post to all of those. Social media does take a little bit of time, and that is one of the challenges of having social media in an agency, especially when we're so busy. But we really want to maximize by selecting the few that we're going to get the greatest input from and pushing all of our effort into that. So based on that population analysis, we can take a look at Facebook and have an agency account, Twitter, Instagram, and then also Nextdoor. Those are the top 4 that I'm actually going to be covering today, and usually those are the 4 that we stick to in the jurisdictions that I've worked with. Obviously, other options are Snapchat and also TikTok, which I'm not going to get into today, but that's a fun one that some agencies are actually exploring for outreach purposes and things like that. And then keep in mind when you're formulating the message that you really want your social media post to meet them, find them, and talk to them. The information and the content should be specific to your community. So touching on those demographics, like we said, the information should be localized. So we're not talking about wildfires in California if we live up here in Virginia or Maryland, right? Or I'm not talking about climate change or rising oceans if I live in Kansas. My residents don't see that. They're not affected necessarily directly by that. So we want to make the message specific to them locally. What are the problems or the impacts that they see in their neighborhood? And we saw that a lot with COVID. The best messages were actually messages that people could see around them and see the impact. Not every city or jurisdiction could look out or travel to their local hospital to see the hospitals overflowing. And that was where people were not connecting with some of those messages. So we want it to be localized, relevant. And we also want to make sure that we're using folk speak, right? So talk like your residents do. People aren't going to connect if we're very formal or even uppity, if that's not what our community is. We want to use the same cultural speak or the same tones to try to connect with them and hopefully get engagement, but also hopefully get them to take steps to prepare or evacuate or whatever we're trying to do via social media. Okay, so we're going to dive into each 4 of these platforms to kind of give some tips on each one that you can take away to really direct your social media strategy. And so starting with Facebook, we like to consider Facebook as kind of a digital bulletin board. So it's meant to be a place where you release updates or information or outreach events, kind of like up there on a bulletin board so people can find and see what's going on with your agency. Keep in mind that Facebook is a network of networks. So you have a personal profile, and then you choose what friends you want to bring into your network. And once you guys are all friends with each other, then you share information through your network that you design. So it's not the most open access information sharing source because it relies on who's connected to who. So you have to keep that in mind with sharing and trying to get information through your community. And then also keep in mind that Facebook is very algorithm heavy. And so what does that mean? That means that they actually control how many of your posts are actually shown to how many people that follow you. So not every one of your followers that like your page are necessarily going to see every post that you put out there. And that's really important to know, because if we're putting out something like an evacuation notice, we want to try to do it in a way that the majority of our residents can see it. Otherwise, it doesn't do as much good. But that's also why we have other information resources like alert systems to help us kind of with that problem as well. Keep in mind too, post timing, what time you post, how many times you post, that can actually affect how many people actually see your post on Facebook. Facebook will actually penalize you if you post too much in one day. And so usually if you post 2 or 3 posts and kind of spread it out over time, you'll get the most views that way. If you were to post 6 posts this morning, Facebook is actually going to think that you're spamming the people that follow you, and they're going to cut down on your visibility. And so that's something to keep in mind when you're scheduling those posts and those releases. Lastly, Facebook is great for recovery. And actually an example that I have is actually occurring right now in my jurisdiction. We had some severe weather on Monday and took on some wind damage. And we have some community groups that are sharing damage stuff with us, but also talking to each other for community cleanup. And we've seen that with Hurricane Harvey. We've seen that with a lot of different disasters. People can actually use Facebook and groups to kind of all assemble to help each other recover. So it's a really good platform for recovery organization or even information sharing. And then Twitter. So Twitter is very much a digital newspaper. It's known for its breaking news. It's also known for its better order structure. There are less algorithms controlling who's seeing what, in what order they're seeing it. It's easier to see the latest stuff, and that's why the media actually heavily relies on Twitter for official incident information or any kind of media advisories or updates, as opposed to Facebook. It's just more open source. Also, you can use hashtags. So if you had an incident, you could use or assign a certain hashtag to post your updates to. Residents have actually been known to go to certain hashtags to get updates from people. And then I do have an example from the Austin area this past winter with the Texas winter storm that they had, where they created a hashtag and did the same thing that you could see on Facebook. They were sharing updates on who had power, who had water, who had resources, who lived near them that could come over and share those things. So people do use those hashtags. So it's important to include those in your posts so that your agency information and your updates are being shared with the people looking for those hashtags. And so this platform is the best for response. And then Instagram. So Instagram is like a digital Polaroid. It's very much telling a story with pretty pictures. That's why it's a giant feed of just photos. You can't post without a photo. That's because the goal of Instagram is to use photos. So you want to make sure that you're trying to collect very pretty photos that you can put onto Instagram, not necessarily a picture of an office, but maybe a really nice picture of a fire truck, or maybe something from the field. Very descriptive photos that are going to catch people's eye and get them what they're trying to do while they're on Instagram, which is find pretty pictures, right? Keep in mind that we cannot post links in the post. So when you're doing Instagram, if you wanted to direct someone to a link, you would actually write in the Instagram post, see link in bio. They would have to go to your Instagram bio account and click the link there in the bio. Instagram does not let you share the link through the photo posts. And really, Instagram is best for preparedness or for building your agency rapport. Like I said, trying to show what you do through a visual concept. And it really is intended to kind of humanize your agency, not necessarily be a place to share ready.gov graphics. You don't get a lot of engagement from that because people aren't looking for graphics. They're looking more for those photos that are showing them what's going on in their world. And then lastly, Nextdoor. So Nextdoor is very much like a digital neighborhood watch, right? People are always posting updates on what's going on, what they see, maybe a fire call in their neighborhood, or maybe some storm damage, and they're trying to share information there. Nextdoor really is a really great place if you want to mobilize passionate people to do volunteer work, to come to your outreach event, to come to CERT class. Those are the kinds of people that are very passionate about being engaged in their community. That's why they're on Nextdoor, and they're very hyper aware of what's going on in their community, and they want to work together to solve problems. So for OEMs, it's a great place to post those things for your outreach events and things like that. And a benefit to Nextdoor is that agency accounts can actually target certain neighborhoods. So if you had like a boil water notice, or if you had something related to a certain neighborhood, you could post just to that neighborhood and get the public safety information to that entire neighborhood. So like I said, there are limitations. Social media is really great, but it can't be perfect. One of them we already touched on, which is the algorithms. Trying to figure out how you can maximize how many people actually see the stuff that you're putting out there, trying to control how many posts you do, what you post, how people react, because believe it or not, if you have a really great post, but nobody likes it, shares it, comments on it, it also limits how many people can see it, because Facebook will actually give you plus points if it's more engagement or engaging to people. It will share it more on more feeds that follow you if it's more engaging. Also, usage access. So social media is great if you really like social media and that's where you're going to get your information. And while we're seeing that change with people, that more and more people are doing that, we still do have a population that do not like social media. They don't use it, or they don't have access to use it. So perhaps there's an access issue with internet. They don't have internet, they can't do social media that way. Also, digital literacy. Some people don't understand social media, or they don't have an ability to know how to download an app, create an account, and do all of those things. So it's important to know that while this is one method to really enhance our information sharing, it can't be the only method to reach everyone in your whole community. Also, your brand visibility. So it's really great to be very passionate on social media and be very active on social media as an agency, but people can only know to look for your agency account if they know that you exist. This is a really big problem that we have in emergency management anyway, because not a lot of people know about emergency management. They don't know about the career or the field. They don't know that we have local level emergency management as opposed to FEMA. They don't know the difference between some cities having their own emergency management, some counties doing emergency management for the entire county. And then also some OEMs are embedded in fire department and police department. And so some OEMs are posting through those accounts. And so there's a lot of complexity with how OEMs are designed around the country. And so while we continue to really push for emergency management visibility, that is something that we need to keep in mind, and hopefully try to get out into the community to try to teach more people about emergency management and what we're doing, so that they can tune into our information sharing and our updates and our website. And then lastly, accessibility. So this is really, really important because like I said before, we should really want to get information to everybody, right? That's going to include people who cannot see, people who have to use screen readers to be able to get their information off of computers, and people who cannot hear through captions and other things like that. And a very large amount of government agencies actually are not providing accessible content right now. That is very dangerous, especially if we're relying on social media to release evacuation information or life safety information. That means that people of those groups, if it's not accessible, cannot take action and protect themselves. They could be more in danger because our content is not accessible. So that's really, really important that we keep in mind that accessibility really needs to be key in what you're doing on social media. And then concentrating on how we can create accessible content on social media. There are a few ways that you can easily craft posts, graphics, and information to make sure that the screen reader does read it properly and they do receive that information, or that your video has captions, so they do have an ability to be able to read what is being said because they cannot hear it. So the first tip is going to be to always have alt text. So if you're posting a graphic or a photo, or especially a graphic with evacuation information, shelter-in-place information, recovery information, you want to make sure to go into the graphic and actually edit the alt text or add the alt text, which you can do in Hootsuite, or you can actually do on the platform when you're posting it. And you want to make sure that everything in the graphic is actually written in the alt text. So if you're giving steps to evacuate, you want to make sure to type out what those steps are in the alt text. That way, when somebody mouses with their screen reader, they mouse over the image, the screen reader will actually read the alt text caption that you provided on that image. If you do not add alt text, when they mouse over the image, it's just going to say blank. So it's really important that we take time to add that to make sure that they get the maximized benefit that we're trying to get through that graphic. Another method of accessibility is also hashtags. So once again, the screen reader, as they mouse over it, it actually reads it out loud. And for it to properly read hashtags, it is best to make sure that you're capitalizing every word of your hashtag. So you're not using all caps hashtags and you're not using all lowercase. You're capitalizing the first word so the screen reader can easily read it to them and they can better understand. For videos, we want to make sure that we're doing subtitles. And if we can, and we have the time and the resources, have a transcript either attached to the website with the video or linked out to where they can go there and the screen reader can read the transcript. That's very important, especially for press briefings, but really for any kind of video content that we're trying to get out to our whole community. Statement graphics. So we see this a lot with sports teams or even some government agencies where maybe they needed to make a big professional statement and they decided to type it all on a graphic and post it because it was easier, maybe with character limits or things like that. While that is fine, remember what I just said about graphics. You want to make sure that you have alt text. So either if you're going to do the statement graphic, you need to make sure to put the whole statement in alt text, or you want to make sure to link the statement to another website so they can have access to that statement. You don't want to just put the statement on the graphic and not have any kind of way for the screen reader to read it. URL shortener. So that's kind of something that makes it easier on them, because if you have a very long link with a bunch of different words and letters and numbers, the screen reader will literally painfully read every single letter and number in the link. And depending on where your link is, if you put the link at the top, they're just going to stop reading and keep scrolling because nobody wants to sit there and listen to the 20 combinations of letters and numbers, right? So using a URL shortener really helps them understand that it's a link and they don't have to listen to the whole link. Emoji mindfulness. So every emoji actually already has alt text associated with it. Maybe it says smiley face with sunglasses, or maybe it says thunderstorm with lightning. All the emojis already have that. And so when somebody mouses over an emoji, the screen reader will read that alt text. So you want to be mindful of how many emojis you're using in your message, what the alt text of the emoji is, and also where you're putting it. Accessibility experts actually say it's best to put the emojis all at the bottom of the post, or you can put them on the back end of like your bulleted list. You do see a trend of using emojis to bullet out lists. And while it looks very nice and cutesy, it's kind of a challenge for them because, like I said, the screen reader will read the alt text of the emoji and then go into the bulleted statement that you're trying to say. So it's best to put it after your statement so that they can actually make sure that they have access to the bullet without being confused to the emoji. And then lastly, that's supposed to say access, so pardon the typo, but we want to make sure that we are using content that is inclusive of our access and functional needs folks, making sure that we are providing safety tips to them and things that are relevant to them. A great example is the shakeout drill. They actually have great graphics for people who have access and functional needs and might not be able to get on their hands and knees to shelter from the earthquake, right? So we want to provide that content, make them feel included and be inclusive of that. And we also want to include them in other photos and other things that we're doing, just trying to be mindful. All right, so kind of changing the pace. We've talked a ton about disseminating information to the public, but it's really important to keep in mind that it is a two-way street, not a one-way broadcast. So social media is really great in the fact that it is one of the only media technologies that we've ever had that allows us to get information from residents. And we can use that during incidents or everyday life to get feedback and information and perception to help us make decisions when we're doing things. Examples might include somebody letting you know that a road is flooded. Maybe they comment and say, hey, my house is flooded, or the road outside my house is underwater. Here's the address. So they're sharing and giving you information that you can actually do something with. Another example is storm damage, showing and sharing where there could be tree damage, power outages, structural damage if their house is damaged, maybe that they don't have access to water if the water systems are down, or also if they need help. There have been situations like with Hurricane Harvey of people actually trying to tweet out because they couldn't get through to 911. All of the lines were logged. They were actually tweeting out to try to get help, saying, hey, I'm trapped in my house, I'm about to drown, can anybody come and save me? Which is really terrifying and really sad, but it is a way that we can get information. And if we can get that information in real time, we might be able to do something about some of these things and save lives while we're also making decisions doing our incident management. And by taking the time to actually go through what our residents are saying and also using techniques to dig up storm reports and other things, we can actually socially listen. And so the first example of doing social listening is to look for storm reports and find those eyes on the ground. Everybody knows that it's very hard to watch the weather radar and sit in an EOC with no windows and have a really clear picture of what's going on in your community. Storm reports and photos on social media are extremely valuable because if you can get them in real time, it can help you have a faster shelter activation if you see a lot of homes damaged. It can help you target damage assessment, figure out where you're going to send people first, and also assess needs. So you can kind of get the scope of what your impacts are faster so you can start to do those things. Engaging in social listening also helps with planned events and threats. So you can actually use it to discover community planned events that might be ongoing that you might need to do public safety actions on. Also threats towards events. Law enforcement is actually using a lot of this social listening techniques and technologies for their threat liaison offices that they have, and a lot of those things to make decisions on whether or not those threats are realistic or whether or not they need to use resources there. And I was actually able to use social media to pick up on a protest event, and it allowed us to have a scope of how many people were interested, how many people were going, which also allowed us to better plan for the resources that we needed to have there, the roads that we needed to close, all of those things. It's very, very valuable to be able to listen and kind of gauge what people are doing. And then lastly, message correction. It's really important to listen to what people are saying about our information because we can figure out if people are getting the message, if they didn't understand the message, or if there are rumors. And when we see those things, we can actually redirect our message and follow up and either re-explain it in a way that does a better job, or maybe include information that we didn't include earlier to help them better understand. And so it's really important that we're listening during incidents and that is a part of your JIC or your PIO role of changing up your messaging based on what people are saying. So we have a lot of tools that we can use to listen. Obviously, if you're very active on social media, you can build relationships with your community and you can actually solicit reports from them. Maybe before a storm, you can post, hey, if you receive any damage this afternoon, send us photos, send us locations. If you actually make those relationships with storm spotters and other people that are active on social media, they will actually find value in helping. A lot of people do want to help you and send that stuff. So relationships are really key to being effective in getting those reports from the community. We can use hashtags. So you can designate a storm spotter hashtag or a weather hashtag that people can use. And when the storm comes or whenever anything is occurring, you can go through the hashtag and see what people are posting on it while you're in your EOC or you're monitoring the weather. You can also use a free tool called TweetDeck. And so that's basically a platform that has a bunch of different columns that automatically connects to a Twitter account where you can set every column to a different hashtag. You can also create a string. And so you can see that string right there. I have an ability to search a location, search a radius around that city, and find all public tweets that involve any of the keywords such as rain, flooding, flood, water rescue, water damage, or rain, because I was really passionate about rain that day, looking for rain twice. So you can actually use those strings and put them into Twitter, and it's going to automatically pull any tweets that residents are talking about with those keywords in it. And for every activation, you can change that. If you're not doing flooding, maybe you're doing tornadoes, you can change it to wind damage. If you're doing snow, you can change it to snow, accident, blizzard, any kind of keywords that your residents might be tweeting about and sharing pictures of what's going on outside their house. You can also use Snapchat Map and the Citizen app, which allows people to crowdsource and share information on platforms with each other. And this is a screen, so you can see that first picture in the back is actually TweetDeck. So you can see the different columns. I had it set up with my home column, my agency account column, one of my spotter accounts that I actually follow and try to get storm reports reported to. And then the next column is actually going to be that thread for Towson, where we're looking for those tweets from people in Towson. And then the next thread is Essex, which is over on the east side of my county. So using those different columns to really search for all of that information. And then that other picture with Houston is actually Snapchat Map. You do not need an account. You can just Google Snapchat Map and you can pull up an entire map of the country and zoom into your area. And people on Snapchat, they have the option to take pictures and share it to the map publicly. And when we have really big storms or we have really big protests or we have really big events, a lot of the younger crowd do that. And so the example I'm showing up here is actually when Hurricane Harvey came up and everybody started posting pictures of flooding and what was going on. You could zoom into Snapchat Map if you were working for Houston and take a look at all of the snaps in that area. And it showed all of the flooding, it showed all of that. So it was very helpful to kind of see what's going on with the storm while you might be inside a situation unit away from windows. And then to wrap up, because I know I'm about 2 minutes out, so virtual operations support teams. So all of us are very busy in an EOC. Most of us might be doing multiple things, so it's hard to have the time to sit there and search through social media for reports. The same goes for our PIO. So you can actually train volunteers to do this for you. You can get vetted volunteers either through your NWS Skywarn or through your CERT program, or you can just solicit volunteers any old way. You can give them training, you can give them background checks or whatever you need to do for your agency. You can put everybody on a chat platform. So for me, I've always used GroupMe to share information, to activate this team. But the purpose of these volunteers are to go onto social media and do exactly what we were just talking about. They're going to use the threads to search for reports. They're going to go and query different hashtags and things like that. And then they're going to forward the reports up to the team lead of the VOS team, who is going to verify, because we know it's very important that not everything on social media is necessarily true. So once we have someone who is designated to verify, they can forward that to the Office of Emergency Management, or also the National Weather Service, who really do need the storm reports when we have these incidents ongoing. And with that, I hope that everybody learned something, and I hope that I was able to summarize things to the right level. I could definitely talk about social media probably for days on end. So if any of you guys have any questions about agency social media, boss teams, anything, feel free to send me an email on either of those accounts. I'm also very active on Twitter, so you can find me on Twitter. And then if you want to see what we're doing as an agency, my agency Twitter name is up there as well. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you, Ashley. Great presentation, a lot of great information, and we certainly are all in this social media world now. As it continues to grow, new apps come out, different purposes and everything. I have not seen any questions pop up in the chat session, but I welcome anyone. If you have any comments or questions from Ms. Morris, please toss them out there, and we'll wait just a couple of minutes, and if not, we will close the almost a chat room, but we'll get to the chat room breakout session. So. Alrighty, I do not see any comments popping up, and I don't see any mics unmuting. So, oh, there's one. Michael Mink. Are there better times to post day to day to get messages out?
Yes, so right now on most platforms, the best time is going to be from 4 to 5 o'clock when people are getting off of work or they're about to get off work, because people are kind of out of energy, so they're looking on social media. Also, that lunch period from 11 to 1 is decent for people at work. If you have a community full of stay-at-home moms or even parents, doing it before school is really important because people will check that out as well. And so those are kind of some basics for you, but it's really important to understand your community and how they work. Because, for instance, if you had a factory community and a lot of people work 12 hours, they might not have access to social media until the evenings. So you really need to play with it, but the best time would be 4 to 5.
Alrighty, I'm getting a message that we're about to be shut down, so all breakout rooms will close out in 8 seconds. So, Ms. Morris, thank you again, and we'll see everyone back in the main session.